Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Server Room. I'm Nandini, your host for the podcast, and we have Santhosh Narasimhamoorthy here with us. He's the manager, technical evangelist for Endpoint Management and Security. Welcome to Server Room.
Hi, Nandini. Welcome and thank you.
It's a pleasure having you here. It's a lot of, I think this is a topic I really want to talk about on the podcast. And so tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you come to be part of ManageEngine? When did you join?
Sure, Nandini. I think I'm also very excited to talk about this topic, especially when AI is a buzzword today. Right, to give you a little details about myself, I'm Santhosh Narasimhamoorthy and I have close to 15 years experience with endpoint management and security. So before joining ManageEngine or Zoho, I was with endpoint security line of products. I was working with, I'm not giving the name, but I worked with another company and previously with the network security as well. So putting all that experience together, finally here working with ManageEngine and managing endpoint management and security line of products.
That's lovely. That's lovely. So, how has your journey been?
Well, it's very different here when I stepped into ManageEngine. On the other side, with the AV vendor where I worked with, it was a very different line of work where we saw those days it was called antivirus. Now it's endpoint security, and we were working signature based, detection systems and all that. But when I joined ManageEngine, I was with the support for endpoint management line of products. Started off with implementing with the with different products with the customers, understanding the requirement, and journey was great. I should say I have gained a lot of insights from customer environments, right? When while working with them, I can still say that there was one customer who purchased like 10 days of training. I'm talking about like 8 years back. So when you say 10 days of training, it was more of I giving them the training. I also learned a lot from their infrastructure as well. So those kind of experiences have given me valuable insights when it comes to endpoint management security. So that's my journey, Anthony.
Perfect. I'm sure those will come in handy today while shooting this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I just wanted to confirm my understanding of what endpoint management security actually is. So, in very basic terms, I think it would probably be having a personal bodyguard for any assets, any devices in any organization. So that bodyguard would probably, have would keep on looking out for any suspicious activity that's happening within the organization, in the networks, in the devices, if any person is, let's say downloading any suspicious data from the internet. So is that what endpoint security is?
I would say that does give you a fair understanding of endpoint security, but maybe I'll put it in a different way. I'll give you an example. When we talk about our own homes, right, relating to everybody. So at home, some might have trained dogs as a security, and on top of that, you will have a security camera, and on top of that, you might have a guard, a watch guard protecting the homes. And of course, if you can afford more, you will have another layers of security as well. But having a trained dog itself, do you think is enough for a security? No. Do you think only having a camera around the house will guard you? No. Do you think only locks can guard? No. It's the combination of everything. It's a layered approach, right? So same goes with endpoint security as well. It's not just one personal bodyguard who's guarding the entire endpoint, but it's more of having different layers that you apply for different reasons. But when they all come together, you get a perfectly guarded endpoint. That's endpoint security.
That's a very interesting way to put it. All right. So, what are the current trends in AI that is something that's very interesting to you right now in endpoint security?
So when the generation, I would say a generation change, right? When it comes from a traditional antivirus to a endpoint detection response, going to AI, now it's Gen AI. So we have seen so much difference in the way the attacks are happening at the endpoint level, right? I'll give an example because viewers can relate to it. So I met a customer in one of the event, and it's essentially a financial institution. and they had an attack. So keep in mind, the attacks that you see on the news is only 10%, because nobody wants to tell outside that their institution has been compromised, right? So we understand that. So when I spoke to this customer, he said there was an attack in their environment, and he was telling me how it happened. Now, the usual way of endpoint detection and response is that your endpoint security agent will be there at the endpoint, safeguarding, understanding the behavior, and taking different telemetry data and everything. And some of the endpoint detection response or EDR programs have a option of recovering the data, and of course a lot of market vendors has it. Now, this specific attack, what happened was, this attack was launched in two phases. Now, the first phase, when this ransomware attacked, it just did an attack just to learn the pattern of the EDR, right? What's running inside the endpoint. Now, the moment it attacked the endpoint, the EDR, or the famous endpoint security product, was able to catch it, and everybody was happy about it, saying, hey, it caught it within few hours or probably within a day and things like that. Now, all this while, the second phase was learning what this endpoint security is doing, which processes it's touching, what is the understanding, and where is the engine, how it goes, and things like that. The moment everything settled, they thought it settled down. The second phase, it launched an attack. Now, this time the endpoint security had no way of countering the attack. So that's the level of attacks that we are going through. And when we see this level of attacks that are happening at the endpoint level, then I think capabilities like AI will play a crucial role in understanding these different attacks that are happening. It could be a ransomware or a malware or any other scripts that are running. So AI should be able to understand all this and make decisions to go deep inside and understand the different processes that are happening. So that's the trend that we are looking at when it comes to endpoint security, and what we are hoping would AI would do in terms of endpoint security.
So, for the example you just quoted, it could be like a one-time thing, right? So, a normalized behavior comes into picture here. Am I right?
Well, this attack, it just went through the traditional way how a ransomware would exhibit. For example, encrypt a file.
Yeah.
And the moment somebody starts encrypting a file, you would go ahead and understand what's going on. The EDR just finds out who is doing the encryption and stops it. Now, the reason for this encryption was not an attack. It was to understand the process of the EDR on the behind. So what are the process it initiates, where all it touch bases, which are the file systems it accesses. So to understand the whole skeleton, and then go ahead and nullify the whole attack by dropping, I would call it as shell bombs, wherever these EDR is. So that's a kind of attack that happened. Now, it took 6 months for them, the client that I was talking about, 6 months for them to understand how this whole thing happened, and then to recover. Of course, recovery was out of it's based disaster recovery. Basically, they had a backup and they restored it. But to understand this pattern, it took 6 months for them.
So, okay. So, despite, like all of these advancements in AI, how important do you think is, let's say, the intervention of a human? How is that going to be beneficial? Is that, not going to have any effect? What are your views?
So, even though we have the AI capabilities, there'll still be a requirement for human intervention. Why? Is because one major problem is the false positives. So for the AI to learn what's the business function, right? And it would term everything as malicious, right? The definition between benign and malicious is a thin line. When an AI considered a file as whether it's considering it as malicious or whether it's considering it as a benign is a thin line. So it would trigger a lot of false positives, and we definitely need an intervention to first train them up, right? In one of the recent article that I was reading, they happen to have an AI for as an endpoint security, and this AI stopped an update from happening, meaning a patch update. He thought the patch update was a malicious behavior.
Okay.
Now, the patch update itself is very crucial, addressing vulnerabilities. But this AI thought that patch update is a malicious behavior and it stopped it. Now, those kind of irregularities are there. Of course, we have a long way to go when it comes to AI. But at this point, we definitely need human intervention to understand feeding whether we are feeding the right data to the AI or not, the learning process, and addressing this false positive. Especially if you are working for a SOC, today SOC, the main problem is the alerts, managing alerts. So much of telemetry data, thousands or lakhs telemetry data. Analyzing those logs, even if you have an AI, still there are scope where there is a human intervention needed. So that's the area where we are now.
Okay, okay. So, a lot of insider threats are, coming up in organizations. How do you think AI would be helpful in tackling these potential insider threats?
Right, that's a very good question. We generally always talk about external threats, right? We always talk about somebody who is uh, something like a Mission Impossible movie. Somebody always putting someone going into the organization in a stealth mode and doing something. So sometimes it's always the insider as well. It could be, I mean, they could do it knowingly, or it could be unknown as well. So interesting thing is, I met one of our I would not say customers, I say a potential organization. So I would probably share the best practice they had, and probably some of the organization might have this. So they have a strategy for the insider, right? They grade the users. Now they have a mechanism, or I would say an application, which grades the user based on their behavior. Now, what type of files they're accessing, what type of websites they're accessing, which links they are clicking, and all those things will give you a score. Now, you should be above a certain score if you have to have access to the corporate application. If your user scores go down, then you'll be blocked with corporate applications. You see that? So that's a great system, So based on your user behavior, so if the application thinks that your behavior is malicious, of course, if somebody has got hold of your account, then of course it will go ahead and bring down the score. You will, by nature, naturally, or by rule, you'll be denied access to corporate applications. So at some point when somebody says, for example, hey, I'm not able to open the file, I'm not able to open the contract, that's because your user score has gone down. Probably you have visited some site, you might be infected, right? The user score has gone down. After a thorough analysis, or the logs gets generated and goes to the team, once they give a clearance. Now the clearance not only goes with in terms of saying the user is okay, but they'll have to go through a training as well. So once they complete a specific training, and then they will be allowed to access the application. So those kind of, this is one side of, reducing the insider threat from the user perspective. The other one is, of course, data leak prevention, DLP, at the endpoint level itself, to monitor what are the files that are being uploaded, which application is it getting uploaded to, whether it's a corporate application or not, who has the access to it. So those kind of things are monitored at the endpoint level. When you have two of these layers, like I said initially, then I think you have a better edge in reducing the attack surface.
Yeah, I think that was like a very good strategy for any organization to actually implement. But UEBA is what it's called, right? User Entity Behavior Analysis. So, is that instant, or it takes like a period of time for you to actually analyze how a user behaves?
So in both, it acts both the ways, depending on the risk score that the user gains,
Okay, okay.
right? So whether, probably, if he has visited a well-known malicious sites, then it's instant. Your access is dropped, right? So of course there is another layer is also there, right? Where at the endpoint level you go ahead and see if the user has access to certain applications or not. So it goes both the ways. But if it's a low score, of course it does take time for the user to.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really good. So, we touched upon like security training. So why don't we, like delve a little deeper? Do you really think AI can be used to make these trainings better? Because as far as I have seen, there's always this gap, like despite the efforts being put in by the security team, there's always this gap between the efforts being put and also the employees taking up the initiative to actually finish the course. Do you think AI can help in, making the course more interesting so that the employees can voluntarily want to finish the course?
I think, from my perspective, I think yes, AI could be involved in certain training agendas that I have seen, is to make it more lab related, if possible. or give them different situations, how to do, and things like that. And one interesting thing was to, during the phishing attack, since we mentioned about training, as part of the training program, the same customer who I was talking about, right? They used to send application itself will generate an email like your boss asking you to review the content before sending it to somebody. It's not really your boss. It would be from a malicious link. The moment you click on that, it scores you down. So those kind of learnings, right? Continuous process. Now they built a robust training platform as well, involving different scenarios that they could encounter. Now it will be industry specific as well. A healthcare will have a different need, a manufacturing will have a different need. So the training based on different industry, and I'll tell you, even if you have so many different mechanisms that are protecting your systems, training is one of the most effective way to reduce the attacks, right? Making user known about what's going on, what's the current trend, especially what's going on with the current AI based attacks that are happening. If you make your user known, then you definitely have a great reduction in attack surface.
Right. So, I think even having training based on each role within any organization or within in any industry, like if let's say there's a healthcare industry and you want to have specific, like it should be customizable. I feel an AI, I feel, can help a lot in making any training customizable to any role or any based on the experience of any employee. I think that also would really help any organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's this other buzzword that I came across and has been going around for quite some time, called causal inference. So what exactly is it?
So the CI is let me probably try to give you a little perspective on that. Generally, what we do is when you do detection, you will see if it's a known behavior that's happening or if you already has a knowledge. Now, this knowledge, right? Instead of, there are two things: surface correlation, and the other thing is, I mean, the CI, right? Inference. So what it does is, instead of just merely saying that a specific file, a specific behavior is a problem, it will go ahead and see the inference of that specific process. What happens if a user behavior, if a user goes ahead and clicks this link, for an example, or if this file is being executed. So based on the knowledge, if the file get executed, it will go ahead and use these processes, touch on these files, and it will have a complete inference of what's going on of a specific process level. So it will have a complete knowledge. So now when it has the CI inference capability, it will be able to correlate lot of different data. So the moment a file or a process get executed, it will be able to correlate it easily, understand the combination. For example, for the users, I'm just putting it in a very simple phrase. For example, if you have a remote access or a remote protocol being enabled in your one of your critical infrastructure, and if you have access to running a PowerShell script there, and if you have an administrator account that's been there for a very long time, now all these three by itself is not a problem, but the combination of these three is deadly, right? You could utilize an administrator to run a script and exfiltrate the data using remote desktop. Understanding this is the knowledge, right? So when you know what will be the outcome and take decisions based on that, that's CI for you.
Okay, so is it like very advanced? Is it at the level where, the model can understand how harmful the combination of, let's say, these three things are?
I would say we are at a phase where it's growing. It's not like more comprehensive. It's just the understanding. Basically, when it comes to machine learning, it's just the difference between what a machine learning and an AI is. So that's a thin line where learning only goes ahead and says, for example, if you have a file and a file, it will go ahead and say if you have this file, it's malicious, and if it has a specific size like 20 KB or something like that, that's malicious. Now that's just having understanding. Now a learning will say which are the files having these file names, file types, and the file size. This is just 3 dimension. There could be more dimensions to it, adding on more dimensions. At first level, ML will learn only these 3 things. It will only correlate these 3 dimensions and see what's happening at the endpoint level. But today, when we go to AI or Gen AI, now this 3 dimension, file name, file size, file type, has grown to 100 dimensions. The same file with the user, same file with the process, same file. These telemetry data should be analyzed at a very high speed. That's when these kind of technologies add value to it. If you have a CI knowledge, enhanced knowledge, you'll be able to say a specific process has a problem, you'll stop it right there. Now the AI will be able to correlate or compute, I would say, so many different combinations and get you out, go ahead and say, hey, this is a malicious behavior, this is a false positive, and things like that. So that's where these kind of technologies are getting mature. And I would say I wouldn't put it as we are already there, but we are getting there.
Okay. So I think even to find out actually the root cause of any problem, I think this would also definitely help, because if there is a human, it'll be much easier for him to actually see this map of, the causality and everything on the screen, rather than him going through every endpoint and checking each and every observation, or let's say log. Am I right?
Perfect. Yes, that's good. Right.
So, there are a number of corporate scams that are being, coming up in the news, and I'm sure all of the ones that are coming up in the news would definitely be lesser than how many of them are actually happening in the real world. So, do you think AI can help in, let's say preventing this, or at least identifying how any organization can fall into this trap of corporate scams?
So definitely, while you rightly mentioned only few of them comes forth, right? There was one exercise that's conducted by Microsoft, and they were observing like 600 different organizations, and there was an attack on. There was a, I would say, an attempt to attack all these organizations. There were 20 successful attempts, and out of these 20 successful attempts, only one organization was able to realize that they were attacked. The rest 19 had no clue that they were being attacked, right? So the capabilities today are so much that you will never know that you have been attacked. Knowing that an organization has got into an attack itself is a great knowledge in today. So that's where AI could give you great insights about in terms of what's happening in the system in an organization, to understand that there are mechanisms where it could be able to say, I really like the ad that came up for, I think it came for Huawei or Xiaomi, I'm not sure, for a phone. So I think it's worth mentioning that ad. So what happens is her daughter calls their parents and asks for money. It's their real daughter. It's a video call. She says, I couldn't board the aircraft for so and so reasons, but I have to take the next aircraft. So she asked their parents to give some more money. It's their daughter on the video call. These two things, why not? Because she's stranded in another place. And the moment they were trying to send the money, her actual daughter came and knocked on the door saying, Papa, are you inside? Now, this was an AI on the background, was able to, replicate, generate the same way the behavior, actual behavior of her daughter, talking to the father, asking for money. And it's an ad. It talks about how the system can detect those kind of anomaly, right? So if it's an AI generated image, or if it's an AI generated script that's getting executed, another AI will be able to detect it and give you. So those kind of technology will help the organization. Coming back to our point, so if there are scams that are happening, the AI should be able to understand what's happening and give you insights, because you understand the other side. Threat actor will also be using the AI technologies, so it could give you a lot of insights in terms of what's happening, what are the scams, and that will help the organizations to move on.
Right. Do we have enough data to train the counter model though? Because um, like NLP and all of that can be used for sure, but do you really think, okay, let's say there are two models, one of them wants to attack and the other one wants to prevent. So the one who wants to attack is definitely going to be way faster in generating, because that's what models generally do. But for any other model to actually prevent that attack by, the content that is being generated by an AI, do you really think this model can actually identify it?
It's a very interesting question. So I'll probably answer it in a very different way. So uh, if you look at zoology, right? Uh, when somebody asks you which is the most sophisticated animal, or I would put it organism in the entire zoology, the scientists would probably say virus. Why is it more advanced? Is because it has shed all the unnecessary stuff. It'll only have tentacle to move. It'll only have one the way to reproduce itself. It'll have a small DNA stand inside it and a tube to protect it. It can live very long time even without a food. It has shed down all its unnecessary fat. No separate organs to process anything. Nothing. All I need to is to survive and to reproduce. That's all my and move. I have these three things. I have basics. I don't have any unnecessary things. Because I don't have any unnecessary things, I am the smallest and I have the least threat. Right? In the entire organ, in the entire zoology, attacking a virus is very difficult because it's the most smallest. Same thing comes taking it back to endpoints or the IT security, right? You should have a lean process. Make sure you have only access to what information you need. You don't have to build lot of bigger systems around saying access to that application, this server. You don't have to build all that. If a user requires an access to specific file system, then you give only to that, and you strip down all the other processes that you see around, right? And when you cut down all the junk, you'll be left with what you need, only that. And you need to have several layers around it. So talking about AI is not the only layer, but you also go back to the basics. You go ahead and cover your vulnerabilities. You keep your patch your systems. You baseline your applications. That's where you go ahead and ensure who has access to which applications. You ensure you have data loss prevention. So you have all your basics covered, and if you have a lean system, then the attack surface would be very reduced. Even though, like I compared to a virus to probably other organization, even though they are big and has more capabilities, attack on you will be very negligible.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very valid point. I think life in general also, the less junk you have around you, I think you'll be in a much better state as well. So what are the data privacy concerns that might arise for any organization while using a lot of layers of, let's say, AI?
That's a great question. Why I say that is, while we talk about the technology so much, AI and how it can, go ahead and help you. On the other side, today what organization faces is the privacy problem. The amount of logs that you give to an AI, right, is which means it has access to those information. I attended one of the Black Hat event recently, and they were giving an example. They were doing a specific, I would say, a scenario using Copilot. And so what happens is you ask everything to a Copilot. Now the employee was able to upload a specific Excel file asking for a specific data, and it, of course, it gave the data beautifully, reading all the Excel file. But the same data, if another user was able to ask the same data, this AI was able to get the source from the file that he has uploaded. So in that experiment, they have mentioned how to avoid it. But in general, I'm saying this is a problem with AI. When you upload a data, when you give so much data to the AI, which means that will also be available on the other side. So it's important to understand the limit where you keep the AI and what data it has, especially if it's a healthcare. It's a great problem. And being compliant to HIPAA, accessing all the different logs, what's happening, IoT devices, it reads the patient information and all that. So it is a problem. That's where some of the organization try to have their own LLMs inside, and then keep the data intact. I think that's one of the Zoho policy as well. It's quite worth to mention. We don't take the customer data to train the data, right? Train our models. So whatever is in your infrastructure stays within that. So we don't take customer data and use it to train our AI to use it for another customer. We don't do that. So that is the best practice for now. But this is an area of concern that is rising up when it comes to AI being used in security, not in just in security, in any way of handling business data.
Right. So I think this was very, very insightful from all the questions I've asked you. So I have like a few last questions I think which will really help the viewers. Do you have any resources or tools that you think people can go look into if they want to understand more about UEMS and AI with UEMS?
Absolutely. So, before talking about the rules, there are two things. One is this, the one that I conveyed already. Keep it very simple, your processes, and have a baseline of baseline security that is enabled around your endpoints, right? So, to help the viewers or anybody from Manage Engine point, we do have tools to ensure you have the basic sanity checks, right from data leak prevention to vulnerability assessment, continuous vulnerability assessment and remediation. Of course, patching comes into picture there as well. EDR, and we have next gen AV that within Manage Engine UEMS that has deep machine learning, and it has capabilities to take different telemetry data, understand different telemetry data on the endpoints, and then stop attacks from happening. So we have tools in AI layer, as well as we do have tools to baseline your entire security stack, right? So in that way, unified endpoint management from Manage Engine side, we have a good stack of tools that can help you to achieve compliance and baseline security, and of course adding AI to that as well.
Yeah. Do you follow any blogs, any podcasts in AI in general for, like you think would probably help the users?
So I do generally follow a couple of people nothing comes to top of my mind. Maybe Prabha Nair is somebody who is very good at it. It's more of learning or how the actual technology goes around. So if there are a lot of, LinkedIn is the best place to start with. If somebody has not start off with LinkedIn, I'm not doing a promotion for LinkedIn, but still, you know, to start off, you can go there. There are a couple of people in LinkedIn who go ahead and talks about these areas, industry specific use cases, what's happening around the world. You will be able to get this information.
Okay, okay, done. And what if, there's an organization out there who actually wants to increase their, wants to enhance their endpoint security with AI enabled? Do you have any, advice for them?
Yeah. So the best advice for them is, I would relate this to X-Men. So the thing is, the teleporter, right? He will always say that I cannot go to a place where I can't see, right? I can't go to a place where I can't see. So you can't protect what you don't know. Inventory of data. You should have a proper visibility into your organization. What applications you have, who are the users, what level of access they have, how many servers, what are the level of accesses they have at network level, at the endpoint level, at the application level. We call it as five pillars, right? We call it as endpoint. You have infrastructure, you have application, you have data. So you if you are able to have an complete visibility, if you have a tools, of course Manage Engine has a lot of different tools for different layers, right? Not just endpoint, at different layers. So if you're able to, as an enterprise, if you're able to have a proper visibility into what you have, then you will be able to protect your data. So that's the base rule of endpoint security or security by.
Yeah, so using AI, they can probably build on top of all.
Of course, yes.
Okay, so do you have any trends or technologies that you're really excited about this year?
So with Gen AI, and of course this, I would say the cloud called quantum computing, where people thought quantum computing is probably will be tough, not possible. With Gen AI, it's with its computing power, it's so much possible. That's what is going on. I'm very excited to know, and also on the other side, little skeptical about how the impact that it could bring on the society. But the computing power is enormous with Gen AI, with quantum computing. So the combination that it's able to pull in and compute and give you results is mind blowing. So that's something that I'm looking forward.
Perfect. It was lovely having you on our podcast today. And we really hope that you come for another episode sometime in the future.
Absolutely. I'm very thankful for you, Nandini, and Manage Engine team. Right. I hope the conversation was insightful for the viewers. And yeah, if time permits, we will meet for another episode. Thank you very much, Nandini.
Thank you. Bye bye.